want to talk a little bit about sprue removal, removing the supports from these parts. A lot of these parts that I design and build, I purposely try to put as much detail on them as possible in a lot of cases. And when you have any of that detail that's overhanging, it's got to be supported, which means a lot of supports. So the downside is you have a lot of supports to remove off of sometimes very delicate pieces. The good news is that the resin, when it's cured, is actually fairly flexible. It's still brittle, but I want to show you a couple techniques I use to remove some of these sprues. So the first thing to keep in mind is to be patient. You know, this takes time to get these sprues off without breaking some of the delicate parts. One of the things I recommend as far as tools is using this Xeron angled sprue cutter. And the way I grip it, I put it in my palm like this so that I can kind of use the heel of my palm here to kind of, help position it and keep it stable. So I'm going to cut some delicate pieces off, some sprues off like this ladder, for example. The ladder is actually very durable, but I'll show you the technique that I use. What I do is I come in here and I go to the tip of the shears and I clip it, and then I trim it back. Watch how I trim this back so that sprue doesn't break off the ladder. The reason I do that is anytime if I cut this piece off here, for example, watch this thing shoot off here like a rocket, okay? Pretty high velocity. Well, if that hit a delicate part, it could damage it and break it. So the good thing to do is to just kind of cut this here and then trim it back. You can see that. The other thing I do that you should notice is that I'm always cutting these sprues at a 90-degree angle. I keep my shears at a 90-degree angle to the sprue, because otherwise it'll put force on it and bend deform the part and then possibly break it. So always cut it at 90. You don't want to cut like that, because you could damage your part. So you notice here I've been cutting. I try to focus on the areas that are the most prone to break and cut those first. But really what you need to do in reality, I guess, is really kind of think about what it is you're going to cut before you cut it. So here's a part. Here's one of the more difficult parts I've made that are difficult to remove sprues. It takes quite a while. There's a lot of super delicate parts on here, as you can see. You got the handles, the seats, the footrests, all these things. So the strategy, you kind of want to develop a game plan of what do you want to cut first. And basically you want to cut the most delicate parts first, okay? And so what I'm going to do probably is I want to get to this handle, which I know is super delicate, and like that seat, which is super delicate, okay? To get there, I got to cut this off, the sprues off the railing first. So let's do that. And again, watch how I cut. I'm going to cut 90 degrees, okay? Trim them back, okay? Get this out of the way. See how I trim it back? Just kind of nudge it back. Okay. And I turn it back far enough to where I can easily get my cutters in there to cut like that handle there. Now, in this case, the handle diameter is smaller than the sprue. So I want to make sure that I cut the sprue, not the handle. So make sure you know where the end of the handle is before you cut it. So I'm going to go in here and I cut it. You can see that. Now it's cut. Now the thing to do again is trim that. Trim it back right next to it so that this sprue can't launch itself into the handle and break the handle. Okay. Next thing I'll probably do is work my way down toward that seat and get into where I can cut the seat. So you're going to have to cut other things out of its way, to get in there. So start, cutting things out of its way. And eventually you're going to be able to get into the seat there. Okay. And it may take some time. This stuff takes patience. It takes me, for these 40mm twins, it probably takes me 20 minutes to get all the sprues off one twin. So definitely is a patience deal. All right, so let's see if I can get into that chair now. See if you can see this. Okay. Got in the chair. Let me go to the bottom of the handle there. I don't know if you can see that, but see if I can get in there. See how I keep the cutters? When I keep the cutters there, I kind of trim it back, and I kind of crush the resin. I don't really cut it. Again, it could launch it off. You cut it in big pieces, so just kind of crush it on the way back. Let's do something else really difficult here. These steps on the back of the gun mount. You know, a lot of stuff, like I said, I kind of went to the extreme as far as detail on these things. And those stairs are a lot smaller than the sprues. It's kind of crazy what this printer is able to do. Okay, you can kind of see the technique. Another thing you saw there at the end there, another technique is to, if you leave a little bit of the sprue on there, okay, you can always cut it off later. In fact, it's easier to cut it off later because the thing will flex. You notice that when you cut this stuff, you know, it flexes, right? You know, so there is some flex there, which is almost required to get the sprues off some of these delicate parts, some of the detail. Hope that helps. Okay, let's cut some other pieces here. Sorry about some of the times I have my fingers in the way of the video. Apologize for that. This is a standard gun turret, early style, pre-1944. So my strategy on cutting this is, again, getting all the detailed stuff off there first, you know, the sprues that are attached to detail first. And then I can get down here at the base, and I can really then just do more slashing and cutting, where I'm cutting multiple sprues at a time, that kind of thing. You still need to be careful, though, on any edge. You still want to trim a sprue that's at the edge of a part that's displayed. Now, if there's a sprue that's internal here, yeah, you can just go in there. A lot of times you can just tear them out. But if it's on the side of a part that's actually displayed, you don't want to ever tear that out or get too aggressive with it. Because if you tear a sprue out, sometimes it'll take some of the material with it, so you'll have a divot in your part. So that's not good. So it's always best to cut it, and then if you need to, sand it. Okay, so let's cut a couple more delicate parts, and I'll show you how to remove the base here. Okay, so here's the top of the gun mount, and you can see there's a little piston and a piston rod, and there's a sprue that's attached to it, which is far bigger than that piston rod. So I just go in there and again cut 90 degrees to the part, and then trim it back. If you leave if there's a little knob on it you can see with like a friggin' microscope, you can always sand it off later. This material sands very well, very easy. So, you know, don't feel like you need to cut it right at the perfectly flush the first time. You can always go back and cut it later. In fact, it's probably a lot safer that way because your part will flex. Okay, I'll finish cutting off some of these other sprues and then go down to the base where it's a little easier and show you some little speedier techniques.